Admiral Jiwan stood on the bridge of the battleship Indomitable, watching the blue curve of Earth spin slowly below them through the reinforced windows that still bore scorch marks from the last alien attack 3 years ago when humanity first learned they were not alone in the universe and that their new neighbors were not friendly visitors but conquerors who came with fire and death. The planet looked peaceful from this distance, but Jiwan knew the truth about what lay beneath those swirling white clouds where cities had been reduced to ash, and millions had died in the first wave of what the aliens called pacification, which was just a nice word for mass murder, and the systematic destruction of everything humans had built. Over thousands of years of progress, Captain Minho approached from the communication station with his face showing the kind of grim expression that had become common among the crew since the war began, and Jiwan could tell from his posture that whatever news he carried was not good news, though these days good news was as rare as peaceful sleep. Admiral, the alien fleet is moving into position, and they are broadcasting on all frequencies with what they claim is a diplomatic message. But our sensors show they have enough firepower to glass half the planet if we refuse their generous offer, Minho said, with the bitter tone that every human survivor had developed when speaking about alien generosity. Jiwan nodded and walked to the main display where the tactical readout showed the massive alien fleet arranged in what their computers had learned to recognize as a standard Galactic Council intimidation formation, with the largest ships at the front displaying their weapons, while smaller vessels formed a protective screen that could quickly become an attack formation if diplomacy failed. The communication channel crackled to life, and the image of Counselor Vextar filled every screen throughout the human fleet and simultaneously appeared on every remaining communication device across Earth's surface, so that every surviving human could hear what the reptilian alien had to say about their future. Vextar's scaled face showed what humans had learned to interpret. As confidence, though, his large yellow eyes held something that looked almost like nervous energy, as he began to speak in the perfectly translated human language that the aliens had mastered during their 3 years of studying human civilization. People of Earth, we come to you today, not as conquerors, but as benefactors offering you a path to survival and prosperity within the greater galactic community that has existed for thousands of years before your species discovered fire and learned to shape metal into tools. Jiwan felt his jaw clench as he listened to the alien's words, because he remembered when similar words had been spoken 3 years ago, just before the orbital bombardment began, and entire cities vanished in pillars of superheated plasma that left nothing but glass craters where millions of people had lived and worked and raised their children. Your species has shown remarkable tenacity and ingenuity in the years since our first contact, and while your military resistance has been admirable, it has also been futile because the Galactic Council commands resources that span 1,000 worlds and fleets that number in the millions of vessels. Captain Minho moved closer to Jiwan and whispered, "Sir, our stealth probes are picking up something interesting from their command frequencies, and I think you need to hear this before the reptile finishes his speech." Jiwan gestured for Minho to continue monitoring while keeping his attention on Vextar, who was now describing the wonderful opportunities that awaited humanity if they would simply accept the wisdom of superior alien civilization and submit to council authority like every other species had done when faced with a choice between submission and extinction. We offer you relocation to worlds that have been carefully selected for human habitation, where your people can live in peace and prosperity under the guidance of council administrators who will help you develop your society in ways that benefit both humanity and the greater galactic community. Dr. Yuna emerged from the science station where she had been analyzing the alien delegation's biological readings, and her expression showed the kind of professional concern that Jiwan had learned to take very seriously, because the xenobiologist had become their best source of intelligence about alien psychology and motivations. Admiral, I am detecting stress pheromones from the entire alien delegation, and their heart rate equivalents are elevated far beyond what we would expect from confident negotiators, and I believe they are much more frightened than they want us to know. Jiwan processed this information, while Vexitar continued his presentation about the generous terms of surrender that the Council was offering to humanity, including the preservation of human culture and the guarantee that families would not be separated during the relocation process to the designated reservation worlds. The Council understands that change is difficult, but we have successfully integrated 47 species into our galactic civilization, and each has found their place and purpose within the greater harmony that we have created through wisdom and careful management of resources. And Populations Minho returned with a datapad containing the intercepted alien communications, and his face showed a mixture of anger and grim satisfaction as he handed the device to Jiwan, who read the translated text with growing understanding of what was really happening. The intercepted messages revealed that the Galactic Council was not offering humanity a generous chance at survival, but was instead trying to solve what they called the human problem before it became too dangerous. To contain, because human technology was advancing at a rate that terrified the aliens who had never encountered a species that could reverse engineer their equipment and improve upon it within months instead of centuries. Your weapons and defensive technologies have exceeded our projections, and your tactical innovations have proven surprisingly effective against our standardized military doctrine, but ultimately numbers and resources will determine the outcome of any prolonged conflict. Ji-Wan handed the datapad back to Minho and realized that the aliens were not offering mercy, but were instead trying to end the war before humanity became too dangerous to defeat, because every battle had taught the humans something new about alien technology and weaknesses, while the aliens seemed incapable of adapting their tactics to counter human innovation. We therefore offer you 7 days to consider our proposal, and we hope that your leaders will choose the path of wisdom and accept the protection and guidance of the Galactic Council rather than forcing us to take more decisive action to preserve galactic stability. The transmission ended, and the bridge fell silent as everyone processed what they had just heard, while Ji-Wan walked to the communication station and opened a priority channel to Earth's surface, where President Hyunwoo was waiting in the secure bunker that served as humanity's emergency government center. Admiral, what is your assessment of their offer? And do you believe they will actually wait 7 days before attacking? The President asked, with the calm voice that had carried humanity through the darkest days of the war, when survival seemed impossible. Ji-Wan looked out at the alien fleet and then at his crew, who had fought and died and fought again to protect what remained of human civilization, and he realized that the aliens had made a critical error in assuming that humanity would choose survival over dignity. Mr. President, they are afraid of us, and they are offering us chains disguised as protection. And I believe that if we accept their terms, humanity will cease to exist as anything more than a curiosity in some alien zoo. President Hyunwoo was quiet for a long moment, and then asked, "What do you recommend?" Admiral Ji-Wan thought about the millions who had died in the first attack, and the children who would never grow up to see the stars, and the future that the aliens wanted to steal from humanity, and his answer came without hesitation. "I recommend we give them our answer, sir." 3 hours later, President Hyunwoo stood before the United Earth Assembly in the deep bunker that had become humanity's seat of government, and his words were broadcast to every human settlement and ship and outpost throughout the solar system. The Galactic Council came to our world uninvited and attacked our cities and killed our children, and now they offer us chains and call it peace. But humanity's answer is simple. The President said with absolute conviction, "No." Councillor Vextar returned to the council chambers aboard the massive command vessel that served as the mobile seat of galactic government, with confidence radiating from his scaled form as he prepared to report on what he considered the successful delivery of humanity's final ultimatum. The council chambers were a marvel of alien engineering, with representatives from 12 different species arranged in a circular formation that had been designed to promote equality and cooperation, though everyone understood that the hegemony held the real power and made the important decisions. High Regent Mordak dominated the center of the chamber with his massive form that combined the worst features of a crocodile and a spider, while his multiple eyes surveyed the assembled representatives with the cold calculation of a predator who had never encountered serious resistance. The humans have been given their choice, and while their initial response was predictably defiant, I am confident that 7 days will provide sufficient time for their more rational leaders to convince their population to accept our generous terms, Vexatar reported with the satisfaction of someone who believed the hard work was finished. The other council members nodded their agreement, because they had all witnessed similar scenarios play out across dozens of worlds where primitive species initially resisted before accepting the wisdom of joining galactic civilization under Council guidance. Mordak reviewed the data file on humanity that had been compiled over 3 years of observation and conflict, and found nothing to suggest that this species would prove more troublesome than any other primitive civilization that had been brought into the Council's protective embrace. A species that required 10,000 years to reach their own moon and another 1,000 to develop basic space travel can hardly pose a significant threat to an alliance that commands the resources of 1,000 worlds, Mordak declared with the absolute certainty of someone who had never been wrong about such matters. Commander Tae-hyun led his strike team through the maintenance corridors of the Council supply depot on the edge of human space, where alien overconfidence had created opportunities for the kind of surgical raids that had become humanity's specialty. The depot contained enough supplies and equipment to support a Council fleet for months, but more importantly, it held alien personnel who might provide valuable intelligence about Council capabilities and intentions. Tae-hyun's team moved with the silent efficiency that human soldiers had developed through 3 years of fighting enemies who possessed superior technology but seemed incapable of adapting their tactics to counter human innovation and desperation. The alien guards never saw the attack coming because they had been trained to watch for other alien species who fought according to predictable patterns and used standardized equipment, rather than the improvised weapons and unconventional tactics that humans had perfected. Within minutes, the depot was secured, and Tae-hyun found himself in possession of not only vital supplies, but also detailed technical specifications for Council equipment, and most importantly, several high-ranking alien officers who could provide insight into how the enemy thought and planned. The interrogation process revealed something that shocked even the experienced human intelligence officers because the aliens seemed genuinely unable to understand why humanity continued to resist what they considered an obviously superior alternative to extinction. Engineer Soman worked with feverish intensity in the captured alien laboratory where she had spent weeks analyzing Council technology and discovering weaknesses that the aliens themselves seemed unaware of. The Council's greatest strength was also their greatest vulnerability, because every piece of equipment was standardized across all member species, which meant that any innovation developed by one species was immediately shared with all others. This approach had created technological stagnation because no species needed to innovate when they could simply adopt proven solutions that had worked for thousands of years across countless different worlds and situations. Soman realized that the Council had become dependent on incremental improvements to existing technology rather than the revolutionary breakthroughs that desperation and necessity had forced humanity to achieve. The aliens built their equipment to last forever and work perfectly under all conditions, but they had never learned to rapidly prototype and test new concepts under battlefield conditions where failure meant death and success meant survival intelligence. Officer Daeho sat in the cramped communications center aboard the stealth ship Ghostwalker, where he monitored alien communications with equipment that had been cobbled together from captured Council technology and human innovation. The aliens used quantum encryption that should have been impossible to break, but human cryptographers had discovered that the Council's standardized communication protocols contained predictable patterns that could be exploited by computers that thought differently than alien minds. What Daeho discovered in those intercepted communications changed everything because the aliens were not the unified military force that they pretended to be, but were, instead, a collection of species held together by fear and dependence on hegemony leadership. Individual species within the Council had no independent military capability and relied entirely on centralized command and control systems that coordinated their actions according to predetermined tactical doctrines. The hegemony had deliberately kept their subject species dependent on central coordination to prevent any single member from developing the capability to challenge hegemony dominance. This meant that if humanity could disrupt the Council's command and control systems, the entire alien alliance would collapse into confusion and paralysis because none of the member species had experience with Independent Action Fleet Admiral Ji-won. studied the intelligence reports from Tae-hyun's raid and Daeho's communication intercepts while planning humanity's first major offensive operation against targets that the aliens considered absolutely secure. The Council had positioned their forces according to standard doctrine that assumed human resistance would follow predictable patterns based on the behavior of other primitive species that had been successfully integrated into galactic civilization. But humanity had no intention of fighting a defensive war against superior numbers and technology when they could instead strike at targets that the aliens never expected to be threatened. The 7-day ultimatum had not been designed to give humanity time to surrender, but had instead provided the Council with time to position their forces for what they assumed would be a simple extermination campaign. Ji-won realized that the aliens had made a critical error in assuming that humans would fight like every other species they had encountered because humanity had never been given the luxury of following standard military doctrine. Human tactics had been forged in the crucible of total war, where survival required constant innovation and the willingness to attempt strategies that more cautious species would consider too dangerous or unpredictable. The Council expected humanity to defend Earth and the few remaining human colonies, but Ji-won had no intention of allowing the aliens to dictate the terms of engagement. Instead, humanity would take the war directly to Council space using captured alien technology that had been reverse-engineered and improved by engineers who understood that perfection was less important than adaptability. The attack plan was audacious in its scope and terrifying in its implications because it called for simultaneous strikes against 3 major Council worlds, using tactics that no civilized species would consider acceptable. Human fleets would jump directly into Council space, using stolen jump gate coordinates, and then proceed to systematically destroy everything of military value while avoiding civilian targets not out of mercy, but because dead civilians could not spread fear. Dr. Yuna had provided psychological profiles of the major Council species that revealed critical weaknesses in their mental conditioning because none of them had experience with the kind of total warfare that humanity considered normal. The aliens fought according to rules that limited casualties and preserved infrastructure because their wars had always been brief affairs decided by superior technology and overwhelming force. They had never encountered an enemy that viewed war as an existential struggle requiring the complete destruction of the opponent's ability and will to fight. Humanity's first major offensive began exactly 72 hours after Vexitar's ultimatum expired, when human fleets materialized throughout Council space and began implementing tactics that would have been considered war crimes if there had been any authority capable of enforcing such concepts. The attack on the Council world of Nexus Prime lasted 6 hours and resulted in the complete destruction of the planetary defense network and orbital shipyards while the population centers remained untouched but isolated. The attack on the military fortress world of Iron Gate resulted in the systematic elimination of every piece of military equipment and infrastructure while the alien personnel were left alive but stranded on a world that could no longer support or defend them. The attack on the Council's primary communication relay at Central Hub destroyed the quantum communication network that coordinated military operations across dozens of star systems. 6 months had passed since humanity's first coordinated offensive, and Counselor Vextar found himself staring at tactical displays that showed human fleets appearing throughout Council space like deadly ghosts that struck without warning and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. The war room aboard the Council command vessel had become a place of constant crisis management, where alien strategists struggled to understand an enemy that seemed to follow no predictable patterns and appeared to be learning and adapting faster than any species they had ever encountered. High Regent Mordak's massive form dominated the center of the chamber, but his usual confidence had been replaced by something approaching uncertainty, as reports continued to arrive describing the systematic destruction of Council military assets across dozens of star systems. How is it possible that a species we nearly destroyed 3 years ago now possesses jump gate technology that surpasses our own capabilities? Mordak demanded with the kind of frustrated rage that his subordinates had learned to fear. The answer came from Council scientists who had been studying captured human equipment and had discovered that humanity had not simply copied alien technology, but had somehow managed to improve upon designs that had remained unchanged for thousands of years. Captain Jamin stood on the bridge of the experimental ship Prometheus, watching as his crew prepared to test humanity's latest innovation in the ongoing war against species that had made the mistake of teaching humans that the universe was a hostile place. The Prometheus carried weapons that had never existed before the war began, because human engineers had discovered that Council Point defense systems were designed to counter known threats using predetermined response patterns. The new missiles carried artificial intelligence that learned and adapted during flight by analyzing defensive responses and modifying their approach in real time until they found weaknesses that static programming could never exploit. Jamin had volunteered to command the first ship equipped with adaptive weapons because he understood that every battle was both a test of human innovation and a chance to teach the aliens that their technological superiority was an illusion. The target was a council fortress that protected one of their major supply routes and had been considered impregnable because its defenses had successfully repelled attacks by every known weapon system in the galactic arsenal. Dr. Yunji worked in laboratories that had been built deep beneath Earth's surface, where teams of scientists labored to transform peaceful research into weapons that could level the playing field against enemies who possessed thousands of years of technological advancement. Before the war, Yunji had been a microbiologist studying the fundamental building blocks of life, but necessity had transformed her into something resembling a biological warfare specialist, though she preferred to think of herself as someone who was leveling the playing field. The captured alien personnel had provided invaluable insights into council biology and psychology that revealed weaknesses no alien species had ever thought to exploit because they had never fought against humans. Human pathogens were harmless to humans, but devastating to alien immune systems that had evolved in completely different environments and had never developed resistance to Earth-based biological agents. More importantly, the psychological warfare techniques that humans had developed could exploit alien mental conditioning that made Council species vulnerable to concepts that human minds took for granted. Fear was an emotion that Council species experienced differently because they had lived for thousands of years under the protection of superior technology and overwhelming military force. Colonel Seungjae led ghost teams that had become legends among both human and alien forces because they seemed capable of appearing anywhere and accomplishing impossible missions using captured alien biotechnology and human tactical innovation. The teams used alien genetic modification technology to alter their appearance and biological signatures until they could pass casual inspection by Council security forces who had been trained to identify known threats rather than impossible possibilities. Seungjae's latest mission involved infiltrating the Council's primary intelligence facility on their capital world, where he planned to steal information about alien military capabilities while simultaneously assassinating key personnel. The operation required his team to maintain their alien disguises while moving through security systems that could detect biological inconsistencies but had never been designed to counter human psychological manipulation. Strategic analyst Kyung-min studied the accumulated data from 6 months of warfare and reached conclusions that would have been impossible for alien minds to comprehend because Council species thought in terms of territorial conquest and resource acquisition. Humans fought wars differently because they understood that the only way to ensure long-term survival was to eliminate threats permanently, rather than simply defeating them temporarily. Every engagement with Council forces had been designed to teach humanity something new about alien capabilities while simultaneously demonstrating human adaptability and innovation. The aliens were fighting to restore the status quo that had existed before human resistance began, but humanity was fighting to create a new reality where Earth would never again face existential threats. Kyung-min's analysis revealed that Council military doctrine was based on assumptions about civilized warfare that included concepts like proportional response and territorial integrity that humans had abandoned as luxury they could not afford. The Council expected enemies to fight for specific objectives using conventional tactics that could be countered by superior technology and numerical advantages. But humanity had no intention of playing by alien rules when those rules had been designed to ensure alien victory against opponents who fought like aliens rather than like desperate humans with nothing left to lose. High Regent Mordak convened an emergency session of the Military Council where his most experienced commanders struggled to explain how human forces continued to achieve impossible victories against overwhelming odds. The tactical reports described human ships that appeared in impossible locations using jump gate technology that somehow functioned more efficiently than the original Council designs that had required thousands of years to perfect. Human weapons seemed to evolve during combat by learning from defensive responses and developing countermeasures that made traditional defensive doctrine useless against an enemy that adapted faster than any known species. Most disturbing were the reports of human infiltration teams that had successfully penetrated Council facilities that were supposed to be completely secure against any possible threat. Admiral Jiwan reviewed the strategic situation from his command center aboard the Indomitable, which had been transformed into a mobile headquarters for coordinating operations across dozens of star systems simultaneously. The war had evolved beyond simple military conflict into something resembling total warfare, where every aspect of Council civilization was considered a legitimate target for disruption and destruction. Human fleets struck at military targets to degrade alien combat capability, while infiltration teams targeted infrastructure and command personnel to create chaos and confusion. Psychological warfare broadcasts exploited alien mental weaknesses to spread fear and uncertainty throughout Council populations who had never experienced the kind of existential threat that humans considered normal. The aliens were discovering that their greatest weakness was not technological inferiority, but psychological conditioning that left them unable to comprehend or counter human methods. Counselor Vextar found himself in the unprecedented position of requesting assistance from species that the Council had previously dominated because human tactics had proven capable of neutralizing technological advantages. The request for help revealed the depth of Council desperation because it acknowledged that the hegemony could no longer protect its subject species from an enemy that seemed to grow stronger with every battle. Dr. Yuna analyzed intercepted alien communications and discovered that individual Council species were beginning to question the wisdom of continuing a war that was destroying their civilization, piece by piece. The psychological pressure of facing an enemy that could strike anywhere at any time was causing fractures within the Council alliance as different species began to prioritize their own survival over collective security. Some species wanted to negotiate with humanity, while others insisted that total victory was still possible if the Council was willing to escalate to weapons and tactics that had been considered too destructive for civilized warfare. The growing discord within the Council was exactly what human strategists had hoped to achieve because a divided enemy was much easier to defeat than a unified one. Captain Minho monitored alien fleet movements from his position aboard the stealth destroyer Ghostwalker and reported that Council forces were being redeployed from offensive positions to defensive ones as the aliens struggled to protect their remaining assets. The shift from offensive to defensive operations represented a fundamental change in alien strategy that acknowledged human military capability while abandoning hopes for quick victory. Human intelligence estimated that Council military strength had been reduced by approximately 40% through 6 months of systematic attacks that targeted key infrastructure and personnel. 2 years of warfare had transformed the Galactic Council from a confident alliance of superior species into a fractured collection of desperate survivors who watched their civilization crumble under the relentless assault of an enemy they had underestimated. Counselor Vextar approached Earth for the second time, but the massive escort fleet that accompanied him was no longer intended to demonstrate strength, but rather to provide protection against human forces that had proven capable of striking anywhere in the galaxy. The Council delegation traveled in ships that bore the scars of human weapons and carried technology that had been hastily modified to counter tactics that no alien species had ever imagined possible. Admiral Jiwan commanded a fleet of hybrid warships that combined captured alien technology with human engineering in ways that created vessels the Council barely recognized as based on their own designs. The human ships were terrifying amalgamations of functional efficiency and innovative modification that demonstrated humanity's ability to take alien perfection and transform it into something both better and more dangerous. Jiwan's flagship Indomitable had grown into a massive command vessel bristling with weapons that bent space and time while its hull incorporated alien materials that had been enhanced through human understanding of quantum mechanics. The meeting between human and alien fleets took place in the neutral space between Earth and Mars, where Council ships maintained careful distance from human vessels that could destroy them before their crews could react. Diplomat Bora served as humanity's chief negotiator, though her title was largely ceremonial because everyone understood that the terms of any agreement would be dictated by the species that had proven superior in warfare. The Council's peace offer included territorial concessions that would have been unimaginable before the war began, as alien species offered to withdraw from vast regions of space in exchange for human agreement to end the systematic destruction. Vextar presented proposals that included complete demilitarization of Council space near human territory and the establishment of tribute payments that would acknowledge human superiority in exchange for basic survival. The alien delegation offered to share advanced technology freely and grant humanity permanent seats on the Council, with voting power that reflected their proven military capability. Bora listened to the desperate alien proposals with the kind of professional detachment that human diplomats had developed when dealing with species that had tried to exterminate their entire civilization. The Council was offering everything they had previously refused to consider, but their offers were based on the assumption that humans wanted the same things that every other species desired. President Hyun Woo had been transformed by 2 years of total warfare from a politician who sought compromise into a leader who understood that some conflicts could only end with complete victory. General Nari stood beside the president as they reviewed the Council's peace terms in the deep bunker that had become humanity's seat of government. Since the war began, the aliens were offering trade agreements and technology transfers and territorial concessions that would make humanity wealthy and powerful within the existing galactic order. They promised to recognize human territorial claims and provide access to alien markets and guarantee that no Council species would ever again threaten human interests. The offers were generous by alien standards and represented complete capitulation to human demands that had seemed impossible when the war began. But Dr. Yuna had spent 2 years studying alien psychology and understood that the Council's peace offers were based on fundamental misunderstandings about human motivations and objectives. The aliens assumed that humans wanted to join galactic civilization as equals and benefit from the prosperity and security that Council membership provided to all species. They could not comprehend that humanity had learned lessons about the nature of galactic power that made their offers not just inadequate but actually insulting. You attacked us when we were weak and peaceful, and you showed us that strength is the only language the galaxy understands, and we have learned that lesson well, Dr. Yuna explained to the alien delegation. The human counteroffer shocked even experienced Council diplomats who had negotiated with dozens of species over thousands of years of galactic expansion. Humanity demanded unconditional surrender of the entire Galactic Council within 30 days followed by the complete restructuring of galactic civilization under human authority. The terms included the dissolution of all existing alien military forces and the surrender of all advanced technology to human control. Individual alien species would be allowed to continue existing, but only as protected subjects under human oversight and administration. The Council's reaction to humanity's demands revealed the depth of their desperation, because several alien species immediately began debating whether surrender might be preferable to extinction. Vexatar attempted to negotiate modifications to the human terms, but discovered that humanity had no interest in compromise because they understood that partial victory would only postpone the next existential threat. The aliens offered to accept human dominance in exchange for the preservation of their existing governments and social structures. But humans had learned that alien civilization was fundamentally incompatible with human. Survival High Regent Mordak convened emergency sessions of the remaining Council members as reports arrived describing human invasion forces that had proven unstoppable against every defensive measure. Half of the original 12 species that comprised the Council had been either destroyed or scattered by human military action that treated entire star systems as battlefields. The surviving species faced imminent human assault forces that had evolved beyond anything the aliens had imagined possible. When the war began, Human military technology now exceeded alien capabilities in every category, while human tactics continued to evolve at a pace that made alien countermeasures obsolete before they could be implemented. Mordak's advisors presented strategic assessments that painted a picture of inevitable defeat unless the Council was willing to escalate to weapons of mass destruction that would render entire worlds uninhabitable. The debate over using planet-killing weapons revealed fundamental differences between human and alien approaches to warfare, because the Council had always fought to preserve valuable resources. Humans had demonstrated their willingness to destroy anything that could not be captured and turned against Council interests, which meant that escalation would only result in mutual annihilation. Fleet Commander Sun Ho led the final assault on the Council's capital world with human forces that had become something unrecognizable from the desperate defenders who had fought the first alien invasion. Human soldiers wore powered armor that exceeded anything aliens had ever imagined, while carrying weapons that could manipulate space and time to achieve effects that violated everything the Council thought they knew about physics. The human approach to warfare had evolved beyond simple military conflict into something resembling natural disaster, as entire enemy fleets were neutralized by weapons that seemed to bend reality itself. Council defensive systems that had protected their capital for thousands of years proved completely inadequate against human attack methods that treated the laws of physics as suggestions rather than absolute limitations. The fall of the Council capital marked the end of organized alien resistance, though scattered remnants continued to flee deeper into space, where they hoped to find safety that no longer existed. Councillor Vextar made one final desperate plea from the Council chambers as human ships entered the system and began systematically dismantling the infrastructure of galactic government. The alien's scaled face appeared on communication screens throughout human space as he begged for mercy and offered complete surrender in exchange for the preservation of whatever remained of Council civilization. We surrender unconditionally to human authority and promise that all surviving alien species will serve humanity faithfully if you will show mercy to those who cannot resist your superior power. The plea was broadcast to every human settlement and ship where survivors of the first alien attack watched their former enemies beg for the same mercy that had been denied to human civilians 3 years earlier. President Yunwu prepared to address both humanity and the galaxy with the final terms of humanity's victory, while Admiral Jiwon and General Nari waited to learn what kind of peace their sacrifices had purchased. The moment had arrived for humanity to decide whether they would become the kind of species that showed mercy to defeated enemies or the kind that eliminated threats permanently. High Regent Mordak's massive form dominated the Emergency Council chamber for what everyone understood would be the final session of the Galactic Council as human invasion fleets approached the capital system with weapons that had proven capable of destroying entire worlds. The remaining alien representatives sat in stunned silence as tactical displays showed the systematic collapse of every defensive position that had once protected the heart of galactic civilization. 6 of the original 12 Council species had been completely eliminated as functioning civilizations, while the others existed only as scattered refugees, fleeing deeper into space where they hoped to find sanctuary that no longer existed anywhere in the galaxy. Mathematical certainty of defeat had become undeniable even to species that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years through superior technology and overwhelming military force. Mordak's multiple eyes surveyed the assembled representatives, who had once commanded the resources of 1,000 worlds, but now controlled nothing except the desperate hope that humanity might show mercy to enemies who had shown none. We face a choice between unconditional surrender and total extinction, and I fear that our pride may have already made that choice for us, Mordak announced with the kind of defeated certainty that had never before been heard in the Council. Chambers Fleet Commander Sun Ho stood on the bridge of his flagship watching human forces take their final positions around the Council capital world that had never before been threatened by any enemy force. The human ships were marvels of hybrid technology that combined captured alien engineering with innovations that no Council species had ever imagined possible. Powered armor-equipped human soldiers with capabilities that exceeded anything in the alien arsenal, while weapons that manipulated fundamental forces turned individual humans into threats equivalent to entire alien battalions. The capital world's defensive systems had been designed to repel invasions by other council species using conventional tactics and standardized equipment, rather than the reality-bending capabilities that human desperation had created. Sun Ho's forces surrounded the planet with methodical precision that demonstrated humanity's evolution from desperate survivors into the galaxy's apex predators. Counselor Vextar made his final broadcast from the council chambers as human ships began their approach toward the capital world that had served as the center of galactic government for millennia. His scaled face showed the kind of abject terror that no council species had ever displayed because they had never faced an enemy capable of threatening their fundamental existence. To the human forces approaching our capital, we offer complete and unconditional surrender of all remaining council assets and personnel in exchange for whatever mercy you might grant to defeated enemies. The alien's voice carried across every communication channel in the galaxy as species that had once commanded star-spanning empires learned what it meant to beg for survival from enemies they had underestimated. We acknowledge human superiority in all matters and pledge that surviving alien populations will serve human interests faithfully and completely if you will allow us to continue existing. Admiral Jiwan received Vextar's surrender broadcast aboard the Indomitable, which had become a mobile command center for coordinating the final phases of humanity's total victory. The battleship had evolved into something resembling a floating city equipped with weapons that could destroy planets and communication systems that coordinated human operations across the entire galaxy. President Hyunwoo and General Nari joined Jiwan on the bridge, where they watched the alien capital world prepare for invasion by forces that represented humanity's transformation from peaceful explorers into efficient conquerors. The final decision about humanity's response to alien surrender rested with leaders who had been shaped by 3 years of total warfare against enemies who had attempted genocide. The choice was simple in concept, but profound in its implications, because it would determine whether humanity became the kind of species that granted mercy or the kind that eliminated threats permanently. The aliens are offering complete surrender, and they seem genuinely terrified of what we might do to them if we refuse their capitulation, General Nari observed with the professional detachment of someone who had spent years planning the destruction of entire civilizations. Admiral Jiwon studied the tactical displays that showed human forces positioned to complete the systematic elimination of council resistance within hours if the order was given. They showed no mercy when they attacked Earth and killed millions of civilians who had never threatened them, and now they expect us to be more civilized than they were when they held superior power. President Hyunwoo considered the implications of both choices, while representatives of the human government waited to learn what kind of galaxy their children would inherit. The decision to accept alien surrender would create a precedent for mercy that might be interpreted as weakness by other species that might threaten humanity in the future. The decision to complete the extermination of council species would ensure that no alien civilization would ever again possess the capability to threaten human existence. Dr. Yuna provided the final analysis that would guide humanity's choice by explaining the psychological implications of each possible decision. If we accept their surrender, we demonstrate that humans can show mercy to defeated enemies, but we also preserve alien populations that might eventually recover enough strength to threaten us again. If we complete their destruction, we eliminate the possibility of future alien threats, but we also transform ourselves into the kind of species that commits genocide as a matter of policy. The debate in the human government lasted for hours as representatives from every surviving human settlement participated in the decision that would shape the future of galactic civilization. President Hyunwoo finally addressed both humanity and the galaxy with words that had been carefully chosen to reflect humanity's understanding of the lessons that 3 years of warfare had taught. The Galactic Council came to our world uninvited and attempted to destroy our civilization, and now they beg for mercy that they denied to human civilians. Humanity has learned that the galaxy respects only strength, and that mercy is often interpreted as weakness by species that understand no other language than force. We therefore accept the Council's surrender, but on terms that will ensure human security and galactic stability under human authority. The terms of surrender that President Hyunwoo announced created what historians would later call the Terran Galactic Union under human leadership and protection. Surviving alien species would be integrated into the new order, not as equals, but as protected subjects who would benefit from human guidance while contributing to galactic prosperity. The former Council species would retain their worlds and populations, but under human oversight that would prevent the development of military capabilities that could threaten human interests. Advanced alien technology would be shared freely among all Union members, but under human control to ensure that no species could gain advantages that might destabilize the new order. The new galactic government would be based on human principles of individual rights and democratic representation, but with ultimate authority residing in human institutions. Dr. Yuna's final report on the transformation of galactic civilization noted that humanity had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history by creating a stable order based on overwhelming superiority rather than mutual fear. The galaxy is at peace now because nothing in it possesses the strength to threaten that peace, and because humanity has proven willing to use whatever force is necessary to maintain stability. The Council species learned that attacking humanity was the greatest mistake in galactic history because it transformed a peaceful species into efficient conquerors, who understand that true security requires total dominance. Admiral Jaiwan stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching human ships patrol the space around Earth where alien fleets had once threatened the extinction of human civilization. Transformation was complete and irreversible because humanity had learned lessons about galactic politics that could never be unlearned. The galaxy would have peace under human protection and guidance, but it would be the kind of peace that existed only because nothing remained that could threaten it. President Hyunwoo's final address to the United Earth Assembly summarized the journey from desperate survival to galactic dominance that had taken only 3 years to complete. We did not choose this war, but we chose how to fight it, and we chose how to end it. And now we must choose how to govern the galaxy we have conquered. Humanity will be the guardians of galactic peace, not because we sought that responsibility, but because we proved capable of bearing it when no other species could. The new order would endure because it was based on the simple principle that the species capable of destroying all others would be the species responsible for protecting all others from the chaos that strength without wisdom inevitably created.